So before we start, let us first know what is poverty. So poverty is a state of having few material possessions or little income. Poverty can have diverse social, economic, and political causes and effects. Statistically, as of 2019, most of the world's population lives in poverty. 85% of people live on less than $30 per day, 2/3 live on less than $10 per day, and 10% live on less than $1.90 per day, which is the extreme poverty. According to the World Bank Group in 2020, more than 40% of the poor live in conflict-affected countries. Even when countries experience economic development, the poorest citizens of middle-income countries frequently do not gain an adequate share of their country's increased wealth to leave poverty. Measures like those promoted by Henry George in his economic classic Progress and Poverty are those that raise or are intended to raise ways of enabling the poor to create wealth for themselves as a conduit of ending poverty forever. In modern times, various economists within George's movement propose measures like the land value to enhance access to the natural world for all. Poverty occurs in both developing countries and developed countries. While poverty is much more widespread in developing countries, both types of countries undertake poverty reduction measures.
Now, the question is, how do we reduce poverty? Poverty reduction, poverty relief, or poverty alleviation is a set of measures, both economic and humanitarian, that are intended to permanently lift people out of poverty. Aid in its simplest form is a basic income grant, a form of social security periodically providing citizens with money. Aid in poverty could also be rewarded based on doing certain requirements. Conditional cash transfer, widely credited as successful anti-poverty program, is based on actions such as enrolling children in school or receiving vaccination. Initial fears that program would be encourage families to stay at home rather than work to collect benefits have proven to be unfounded. Instead, there's a less excuse for neglectful behavior as, for example, children are prevented from begging on the street instead of going to school because it could result in suspension from the program. Unconditional cash transfer appear to be an effective intervention for reducing poverty, while at the same time improving health and education outcomes. Welfare states have an effect on poverty reduction. Currently, modern, expensive welfare states that ensure economic opportunity, independence, and security in a near universal manner are still the exclusive domain of the developed nations. These modern welfare states, which largely arose in the late 19th and 20th centuries, seeing their greatest expansion in the mid-20th century, and have proven themselves highly effective in reducing relative as well as absolute poverty in all analyzed high-income OECD countries. A major proportion of aid from the donor nation is tied mandating that a receiving nation buy products originating only from the donor country. Some people disagree with aid when looking at where the development aid from NGOs and other funding is going. Funding tends to be used in selective manner, where the highest ranked health problem is the only thing treated, rather than funding basic healthcare development. This can occur due to a foundation underlying political aspect to their development plan, where the politics outweigh the science of disease. The disease then treated are ranked by their prevalence, morbidity, risk of mortality, and the feasibility of control. One of the proposed ways to help poor countries that emerged during the 1980s has been debt relief. Given the many less developed nations have gotten themselves into expensive debt to banks and governments from the rich nations, and given that interest payments on the debts, often more than country, can generate per year in profits from export, canceling part of all these debts may allow poor nations to get out the hole. If poor countries do not have to spend so much debt payments, they can use the money instead for priorities which help reduce poverty, such as basic health care and education. Efficient institutions that are not corrupt and obey the rule of law make and enforce good laws that provide security to property and business. Efficient and fair governments would work to invest in the long-term interests of the nation rather than plunder resources through corruption. Another approach that has been proposed for alleviating poverty is fair trade, which advocate the payment of an above-market price as well as social and environmental standards in areas related to the production of goods. The efficacy of this approach to poverty reduction is controversial. Experiments done in Africa, Uganda, and Tanzania, and Sri Lanka on hundreds of households have shown that a bicycle increased the income of poor family by as much as 35%. Poverty reduction requires governments to identify and reach out to extremely poor and help them out of poverty through sustainable measures. One such as approach, supported by many international donors, is a target poverty reduction programs.